Welcome back to another episode of Anna Wolf in the Cabin. This episode is a goodie. I love enriching conversations with others, one that makes yourself ask better questions and, how I would like to say, telling yourself better lies. Now, this episode is a conversation with my dear friend, Shannon. I met Shannon roughly 13 years ago in Cape Town, South Africa. And at the time, I was in this push-pull space, wanting to be seen, but also desperately not wanting to be seen. I didn't know it back then, but I had, of course, ADHD. And my internal dialogue could be mentally debilitating. I was jumping from one topic to the next, not just in conversation, but also in my work. And the anthem of, "I think I'm alone in this," became my karaoke power song that I was proud to sing from the mountains of Kilimanjaro. And then entered Shannon, a wondrous soul, one I will forever be grateful to know. It all came down to one specific day. Out in Bali, on the island of Nusa Lambangan. We were there for a surf trip with about 12 of our closest friends, but surfing, not really my vibe. Sure, the island was everything and more, but the idea of chasing waves felt like an energy drain. While the rest of the crew went surfing one day, I often found myself at the accommodation, twiddling my fingers and getting lost in my brain. Sometimes that was a magical place to be, but more often, not so much. One particular day, Shannon didn't feel like surfing either. So she invited me to join her by the water, just to chill. And at the time, we didn't know each other that well. We were kind of friends by association. Our boyfriends were surfers, and that's how we ended up hanging out. I reluctantly went with this girl named Shannon. Now, I wasn't someone who easily engaged in conversation with new people, mostly because my mind struggled to stay in the present moment. Thankfully, that's changed now, but back then, it was a big part of my life. So we headed to the beach, and oh my goodness, it turned into the most magical time. I told Shannon I was going to take my boyfriend's surfboard with me, thinking I could maybe catch a manageable little wave. For what it's worth, I figured I could at least stand on it like a boogie board or rollerblade down the ocean. What I didn't realize is that the surfboard had no fins. Yep, that's how little I knew about surfing, but I thought, no fins, no problem. Surely I could still ride a baby wave. Turns out there were no waves, and thank goodness. It gave me the perfect opportunity to lay the finless board down and just float gently on the water. And there was Shannon, barely speaking, but when she did, it came from such a wise, grounded place. Her tone made me feel immediately seen. Her voice vibrated with support, quiet power, calm. The conversation wasn't particularly deep, but her presence, oh, her presence. It showed me parts of my unknown self. And ever since that day, I have been reminded we have a soul contract. I'm so lucky to have her with me here today. Shannon, welcome to Anna Wolf in the Cabin.
Oh, thank you, my friend. What a lovely memory. That's really taking us back here. Sure.
I know, right? I felt it was when I scripted this segment of the episode, I thought, oh, this is such a lengthy intro, but oh gosh, it's so worth honoring the space and giving the listener just a bit of a framework of how it is I know you, because I think you have so much wisdom to share with the world. So thank you again for sharing your time. So I'm going to jump right in. My first question is, can you please give the listeners a summary of your timeline over the past 10 years from the perspective of your entrepreneurial journey?
Sure. So I'm actually going to take it back 20 years because that's just going to give you a little bit more context to where I'm at today. So my from the age of 20 to 30, I was a freelance web designer, working with mostly female startups, female entrepreneurs, and creatives in that space. And then I had my son Leo when I was 31, and the plan was to have my baby and then go back into the web design field. But things changed, as motherhood does to you. I got sent in a completely different direction because motherhood came with its own set of challenges. And one of the things I discovered about my baby was that he needed to be on my body 24/7. So that kind of led me down the path to designing a baby carrier. I had a baby carrier gifted to me by a friend, and it just came in so handy. And I needed to get back out into the world and carry on doing my web design career. But what happened was I couldn't do that without this baby carrier. And very soon he grew out of that. And by 3 months, I was now on the search for a different baby carrier that would be just as comfortable as that one. And that didn't happen. So long story short is I landed up designing my own baby carrier, and I built that into a brand and worked on that from 31 up until I sold that company in January 2024. So that was really, in terms of my entrepreneurial journey, that's kind of what I was spending my time on for the last 10 years. But a couple of years, probably like by 2022, I really realized that I had grown so much as an entrepreneur and my own vision for my life had changed. And I had learned so much being a founder of a business and growing the business, working with people. And I realized that the coaches that I was working with and the work that I was doing on the sidelines of running the business was mostly emotional regulation work. And that is what was supporting me. And what I realized was really, really missing in the entrepreneurial field, in the field for creatives. There's a lot of mindset work out there, but there's a big gap for helping people become emotionally regulated so that they can actually do the work they want to do from a grounded space. And so I knew that I was going to move into that direction before I even exited that company. And I started studying with the Center for Emotional Education. And I became a qualified neuro-emotional coach about 2 years ago. So I have been practicing since then, but I only actually exited the baby carrier company in February of this year. So as of then, I'm now completely on this new journey of, helping people to just be more in touch with their own feelings and their own emotions so that they can really live an aligned life.
Did Ubuntu Baba, the baby carrier company, was it a quick process, like the start of the idea being birthed to actual execution and moving very quickly into revenue? Like, it feels like that timeline happened really quickly.
Yeah, that's such a good question. Because when I think back now, I actually don't know how I did it so quickly. I think it came from a point of, or a place of desperation, really, because I really needed to carry on working. And I had found the solution, which was a baby carrier. That is the only way I could get my baby to sleep. And then when he started growing out of that, I started to panic. And I was like, oh my gosh, how am I going to get my child to sleep so that I can do my work and make money? And I really couldn't find a solution. So with my dad being in the backpack manufacturing industry, I was like really lucky. And I said to him, I took all these baby carriers that I bought and I was like, Dad, I really need to make something that is going to help me because I need to get my child to sleep. And so we worked for 3 months. I went to his factory every day or every time I could spare with my baby. He was my little guinea pig really for this project. And I got to test it with him and try out all the different fabrics and buckles and things like that. So from that space, when I initially started building, it was really for a desperate need to help myself. And as I started moving out into the world and actually wearing this thing and meeting other moms and them going, wow, what is that? And can I try it? I started to realize, hey, there's a real need for this. So that's when the idea came to me. It was like, okay, this is actually something I can turn into a business. And from working with all those female entrepreneurs before, I could see what worked, what didn't work. And I just had marketing and brand strategy kind of built into my bones at that point. So, coming from that background, understanding the world of e-commerce, which was just starting to take off really nicely, web design, it was quite easy for me to it took 3 months to get to a prototype, which is also pretty crazy. And by the time I had that first prototype and people started asking questions, it was pretty easy for me to then go, okay, let me quickly make a website, throw a Facebook page together and start actually selling these, because I was like lending it to a friend. And then I was like, oh my gosh, now I need another one. We need to make another one. So it did happen pretty quick.
How do you relate to the following? If something does not come easily, like if you have this goal or wish for your life and it does not come easily, is that an indication that it's maybe not time? Like, what would your advice be to someone who, if your intention is to really serve for the highest good of all, I feel then what you want to be manifested comes miraculously and supernaturally really fast. Is that something you feel definitely played a role?
Yeah, it's tricky to say for me if that played a role. So I think the question you're asking is, when you're trying to serve the greater good and you want to manifest something, how how does that, what's the best way, or does the vision need to be super clear? Or maybe can you define the question a little more?
Yeah, I feel like the stuff that you do for the purpose of feeding one's, let's call it ego, it sometimes takes longer to come to fruition when it's something that has a very clear cut vision and it is for the purpose of serving the highest good of all. The flow of that comes much easier. That is at least how I've been able to interpret it in my own life. I feel like when I have ideas and startups, etc., they take very long to come to fruition. Now, is the question because the vision isn't clear?
Okay, got it. So I think then what we're talking about really is, we can't talk about manifesting without talking about the law of attraction. So I think that, it doesn't matter whether it comes from a point of good or a point of evil. Manifesting has got to do with, remember the movie The Secret? I loved The Secret. And what I've realized on my journey is that there was a missing piece to that, because it doesn't matter how many manifestation boards you have, it doesn't matter how many dreams you write down and goals, it doesn't matter how many business plans you have or how clear your vision is. What matters is that life is not going to give you back or give back to you what you write down or what you create on that vision board. It's going to give you what you believe you deserve.
Thank you. That just landed for me in a really big way.
So, in order to manifest what you want to have, you need to be able to have a very deep awareness for where you're at in life, emotionally, what your mindset is like, and definitely in terms of your projections. Because if you say you want to manifest something, but you actually don't believe you deserve that thing, then it's not going to be possible to manifest it. So that's why this sort of work is really important. Having the awareness around what it is you want to manifest, and if you truly actually believe you deserve that, those things need to be tied together.
Yeah, it's often when one asks a question, a good answer always just gets you to the root of what is actually happening. So thank you. That was beautifully answered. And I do want to touch base on the whole manifestation thing and where you're at now, of course, a little bit later. So, but before we get there, you've moved in so many different directions in terms of like your entrepreneurial timeline, and I absolutely really admire that. We only have this one life, so why not explore all the spaces we're capable of thriving in? Like, one of my favorite entrepreneurial philanthropists says, she's a mindset coach, and her name is Regan Hillard. She says, you can totally have it all. And I am a firm believer in that. And I think that's why I'm so uh, energetically always attracted to our conversations, because, you're such a reminder of that to me. So when I go onto your Instagram profile, it says neuro-emotional coach, creative entrepreneur, and guide for those here to live with the deep inner clarity. You are truly, truly this to me, and I'm sure by now for so many others. So, uh, I want to go to my next question in tangent with that. Can you give the listener an in-depth understanding of what neuro-emotional coaching is?
Yeah, sure, sure. It's so funny that you said that about my Instagram bio because I don't even think it says that anymore. That changes weekly. You know, I very much identify with my what people land on if they discover me, and I change that quite often. So most likely says something else by now.
I'm so glad you're saying that because I was walking Wolf this morning in the park on my Instagram and I edited my profile. I was like, no, you are this, but you're also this and this. Okay. And then I ended up deleting it and just leaving it as that.
Yeah, it's like one week I'm this, one week I'm that. What's aligning?
Exactly.
Okay, so in order to understand neuro-emotional coaching, let me just explain the basic brain state model. So I like to use Dr. Becky Bailey's brain state model. She's built this model mostly it gets used mostly in parenting and teaching scenarios because it explains the child's brain, and it's a conscious discipline model to help children learn and be in the receptive mode. So I like to use it because it's so easy to understand, and it's what we base a lot of our work on in our studies as neuro-emotional coaches. And this all stems from the Center for Emotional Education and how they have worked with this model to create the modality that we coach with. So if you imagine your brain, it's like a three-story building. And in the top floor, you've got your executive brain state. That's where all the magic happens. It's where you really want to be living your life from. Creative problem solving, high-level thinking. It has the ability to zoom out, then get really granular, does teamwork really well, that sort of thing. Any sort of executive kind of planning scenarios, that's where you want to be for that. Then you go one floor down in that lift, and you go to the middle floor, and that's the middle brain state. That is the emotional brain. And the emotional brain really just is there to process emotion and move emotion, to scan the environment. Is the environment safe enough? Can I share this emotion with somebody else? And that's how your emotion gets processed. If that all goes well in that brain state, you can then elevate back up in the lift. So you've got to move through the brain states. And then we've got at the very bottom floor, the lowest brain state is the survival brain state. And the only point of the survival brain state is to really keep your heart beating, keep the blood flowing through your veins and the air moving through your lungs, and keep you safe, physically safe, away from danger. And if each brain state, the way it works is if the survival brain's needs are met, then and its needs are physical safety. If you can meet those needs, then you can elevate upper brain state to the emotional brain. And then the emotional brain's needs is it safe to experience and process the emotion I've got on board? If it is, you can move up to the executive brain state. So the way our body is meant to work, or our brain is meant to work rather, is that we live most of our lives from our executive brain, and then we move down and we process emotion when we need to. And if there's danger, we go down to survival brain, and it takes care of the danger and keeps us alive. You know, if we put our hand on a hot stove, we quickly move it back before our brain has had the thought. That's the survival brain in action. Or if you're driving in your car, you quickly need to swerve out the way for somebody. That's what that job is of the survival brain. And then you're meant to elevate back up. But in this world we live in, you know, especially since the lockdowns and everything that everybody's going through, and the state of the world we currently live in, unfortunately, there's not many of us walking around living in an executive brain state. Even the people running countries, we are majority of the time living from a survival brain state, because our brains are perceiving the world as it stands as not only not an emotionally safe place, but not even a physically safe place, whether we are in proximity to that danger or not. I mean, we're watching wars happen constantly and babies being blown up. It's not exactly good visuals or good stuff for our brains to process. It's really difficult to look at that stuff. And so what's happened is it's kind of done a 180, and most of us are walking around from a survival brain state, trying to process our emotion, trying to have executive brain functioning. And the survival brain is really, really bad at those things. It's it can only have four possible responses when it moves through the world. And that is to fight the situation, to flee the situation, that's the flight response, or to freeze to keep itself alive, or to appease. And it's going to do one of those four things as the only options that it has on board, whether it's to the person standing in front of them, the situation they're dealing with, or even with itself. So it's really not the optimal place to be living from. So a neuro-emotional coach's job is to help the client kind of get an understanding for where their emotional landscape is at in their lives, look at their goals and desires and the places that they want to be going to, and help them really unpack those stories and those emotions that are just holding them back and keeping them stuck. So we really help a client build an awareness, number one, because without awareness, you can't really do anything. So build an awareness around where they're currently at, where their mind is at, where their body is at, the brain state that they're currently living from, and then give them strategies that are going to work for them so that when they find themselves in those brain states, they are able to elevate out of them more efficiently, more quickly, and not waste so much time looping in those places and really not being able to achieve the things they really want to achieve in life. And we do this during session, over long periods of time, or we just help people release the emotion on board. One session here, one session there. But where it really comes to its best fruition is in consistent sessions over a period of time. So, where it differs to normal traditional therapy or other sort of mindset coaching, where I found the biggest impact for myself is, I did use, especially as an entrepreneur, you often have mentors that you work with or coaches. And especially when I started having to lead a team, I found that a lot of this work was incredible. I mean, not to ever put any shade on any other types of coaching and therapy, but it all did wonders for me. But it only could get me to a certain point. And then I felt like I just hit a ceiling. Like I had this information, but was I really able to embody it? I'm not sure that I was at that point. And it was only when I was able to plug in this understanding and knowledge of my own brain state and where I was operating from that it started making more sense for me. I was like, okay, this makes sense because I've got the strategy right. I'm just not able to execute because I don't have access to that part of my brain. I need to be able to elevate. I need to be able to regulate my emotion so that I could actually get to the executive brain state where all that magic happens. So, when I noticed these things happening in myself where I'm hiring people, but then I'm hiring the wrong people. And it was so obvious. Like, so I had been appeasing myself in those moments, convincing myself this is the right person because I've got so much on my plate. I really need to delegate. And, so I landed up having to hire the wrong people, fire the wrong people, sometimes even fire the right people, making bad financial decisions, making bad relationship decisions, bad parenting choices, just all over the show. And as soon as I was able to plug in this other side, this other knowledge that was really missing, the emotional regulation and having some body wisdom come to the show, that is when really everything changed for me.
Insane. So much to unpack, merely out of just the thirst for knowledge, I guess. I think anyone who listens to this would be like, wait, what? So I can actually not be my stories anymore. So that's pretty incredible. I had a conversation yesterday with Michelle, who's based in Melbourne, Australia. She has a platform called Caboose, and it's this very inclusive, trusting environment. It's an online platform that basically helps people feel that they're not alone in their quest, I guess, to get more knowledge on if you've been diagnosed or if you're wondering if you are perhaps on the spectrum. And for me, it's obviously, I had the chat with Michelle about the fact that I have ADHD. Now, this is, I think, a very important thing to bring up because with your studies and your knowledge now as a neuro-emotional coach, that was the biggest thing I try to get over to Michelle and to her online community is like, if you did choose to go the medicated route, the journey doesn't stop there. And, taking ADHD aside and medication aside, the journey is not just one thing. There's not just one answer. And I think that's why I love my sessions with you as my coach, because integrating now from a place of where my brain is at now, how to move forward and gaining more tools is still something I need to work towards. And it's still something I need to actively practice every day. And I think if you're listening to this, Shannon would be the perfect coach for you if you are on the ADHD journey, like myself, to help me understand and identify when my brain is responding in a certain way and knowing in which brain state that is stemming from, so that I can at least separate my response to my action. And Shannon, do you work with a lot of people who are on the spectrum?
Yeah, so it's very interesting because the people that have worked the best with this work, actually, I think it is more ADHD inclined people, because we are the ones that's looking for systems to support the way our brains kind of ping pong all over the show. And, I think there's many people that haven't been diagnosed ADHD, but they experience many of the symptoms, and they might not be interested in a diagnosis, but when they start to get exposed to this sort of work, it really starts to support them. And the thing is, I work with parents of ADHD children quite often, where this can really help them understand their child more, because they might be a neurotypical individual and their brain might work a certain way. And now all of a sudden they've got this child that's steadfast on certain things and they can't seem to break through. But when they get to understand, okay, it makes total sense because my child's in a survival brain state right now, trying to teach from this place, it's not going to land. The brain doesn't have the capacity to absorb. So then getting a survival brain state strategy to use with that child in that moment can save a half an hour of pushing and pressuring and going uphill, and turn it into a 5-minute, support session for the child where they naturally elevate. And when a child naturally gets back to an executive brain state, then they want to learn. Their brain's the way that Dr. Becky Bailey explains it is, she says that for the different brain states, the survival brain is asking one question, am I safe? The emotional brain is asking one question, am I loved? And the executive brain is asking one question, what can I learn from this? So these things happen naturally when the child is in the correct brain state. So for ADHD children and for ADHD adults or people that might think that they are ADHD, it's very useful because having that knowledge on your side allows you to dispel a lot of the guilt for the way you're reacting, because it makes sense. That's what it did for me in a big way. Is of course I'm going to react to my child in this way. Of course I'm going to react to this TV program in this way and be triggered by this, because this is where my brain is at. It's not able to process in a logical way right now. It's in an emotional state, and then meeting myself there, it's also such a wonderful form of self-love, because you get to, have the autonomy and the tools on your side so that you don't have to always rely on external people or tools to help you. You can actually do this work yourself.
A big story that I tell myself about feeling judged because I am now so open about the fact that I know my doctor's diagnosis is ADHD. And the reason why I have such a judgment towards that is because I despise labels. I despise anything that puts me in a box. If I am not fueled by feeling free and coloring outside of the lines, and I'm being told what to do, I rebel. And your answer now really helped me hit it on the head in terms of, because that's what I think I was really struggling to get across in the conversation yesterday with the Caboose online live talk, was that, if you don't want the diagnoses, but you can relate to so much of what ADHD looks like, or ADD looks like, or autism looks like. There are so many ways that you can help yourself, not just the medicated, not just the getting the diagnoses. The diagnoses is just the start of the universal like space that you're about to enter of knowledge, and knowledge is power. And that's why I'm so excited to continue my neuro-emotional coaching with you, because it's such an investment. The medication, the route that I've chosen, yes, it works for me. If anything, it's just elevated my brain state in a way that I always knew was there, but I didn't know how to access it. So yeah, I mean, I'm just going to use this moment to like compliment you on that. Like, you are genuinely, I think everyone's changing the world, but I want to narrow it down. I feel like the work you're doing is incredibly impactful, and it's such a domino effect what you're doing. So yeah, just thank you for that.
Thank you. Yeah, I love the domino effect part because it's, it is one person at a time, because if one parent can just parent differently and have more awareness, and it's not like this is the only way, like you said, there's so many different ways. It's about what route helps you find your own awareness and your own regulation and your own self, because actually this is the whole point, is this sort of work brings you back to yourself. It's letting go of all the stories and all the dramas and things that have been woven into your nervous system that's now running the show. That's actually not true. That's not actually truly who you are. And if you're choosing the medication route, or if you're not choosing the medication route, this is complementary, because whatever way you're able to access that executive brain state, that's kind of really where you want to be doing the majority of living your life. You want to be able to go down to that middle floor and that bottom floor when it's really necessary, and then actually elevate up instead of having this processing happening from the survival brain and kind of swimming upstream constantly.
Yeah, the biggest question I get is, I'm so happy for you that medication works for you. I'm really scared of going that route because of things that I've seen within addiction, things that I've seen within my own family members, and I have the kind of personality to go all in or nothing. How will that alter? And I think my advice is always get a first opinion, second opinion, third, and maybe even a fourth. And but again, to your point, do what works for you. If you feel it's meditation, clean, healthy lifestyle, and teaming that up with someone outside of you, like yourself, a coach outside of you that can go, don't worry, nothing serious is going on here. We're going to do it step by step, and it's going to be okay.
And also exploring like that question of fear, that's a feeling of fear coming up, and fear is a very big feeling that can send a person into survival. And then just remembering that that's a very valid question. Like, that is a big question, but what is actually the projection around that question? It's so important to explore that fear and be like, okay, well, what else am I afraid of here? And maybe working with someone to understand that fear properly, because is that fear coming from a survival brain state, or is it coming from an executive brain state? Because from a survival brain state, then you're gonna either fight against it and say, no, this is not for me. You're gonna run away from it. Or maybe you're gonna be like, oh, I'm just gonna take it. I just have no other options. That's kind of an appeased response. So you want to be able to make an informed decision. So exploring that fear and unpacking that fear around, should I take the medication or should I not take the medication, is part of the process. And when you feel clear in your answer, that you feel like that answer is coming from a grounded executive place, then you can know, okay, now I can move forward. Because the point of this sort of work is to make sure that when you do make decisions, you're making aligned decisions, not decisions from a survival brain. You must never, well, not never, but you must try not to take action from a survival brain state, because you know that from that space, you don't have all your brain chemistry on your side. Your survival brain doesn't care about your emotional well-being. It doesn't care about reaching your deepest desires and biggest dreams for your life. All it cares about is keeping your heart beating and keeping you out of physical danger. So we don't want to be acting from there.
Before my diagnosis, my brain was so busy that if we were having the same conversation, I would totally get what you're trying to say and saying, but it would not manifest. It would not land. It would just be knowledge, and my brain would almost skip over a few words and only take the main words and say, oh, wow, this is actually something that will really benefit me. And then when the conversation is over, because the brain is so busy, overstimulated, in almost like a high cortisol space the whole time, it would just, it doesn't have the capacity to even think about having this as an option. I don't even know how to put it. Like, it feels like you're asking me to climb a mountain, and I don't want to do it. And so rather I'm out. I was the flight. I was the freeze and the flight most of my life.
It's really good that you mentioned that about the like skipping words, and because that is what survival brain does. It's just like, what's the only information I need here? So like if, for example, like if you read a message from someone and it triggers you and then you jump into survival brain is not going to read that message properly. It's just going to pick up the biggest words the quickest way possible. So it's like, it's kind of scanning the environment for absolute danger. It's going to pick up the very high-pitched sounds and those sort of frequency. It's going to miss out on anything that's actually detailed or important. It can't hear properly, it can't read properly, it can't do any of that stuff properly.
Just hearing you say that was my life. I don't know, since I can remember, age of 5. It's when you wake up like that, when it lands for you. It's, oh my God, it's like, I said this yesterday, I think that's why I was always so attracted to the movie The Truman Show, because I was being woken up by living in this dream state that just, it was always, I remember as a kid always getting this visual, which is now from a spiritual essence, it was probably my higher self wanting to wake me up and go, hey, this life, it isn't real. Wake up, you know? And this is exactly, again, what I'm experiencing just listening to you. Okay, let me go on to the next question. I personally started moving into new timelines, and I totally stole that line from you because I just loved when you said that, when you referred to things as timelines. When I began letting go of old stories, and then I truly started looking at what no longer served me. And I always feel like that's when the floodgates of abundance opened up. More money, more health, just more everything. And even the people around me miraculously started shifting as well. It was almost like the people in my life were a direct reflection of where I was at. And how can neuro-emotional coaching help people? And I think we've very much dabbled in that already. But what are the first things that come to mind for you when someone goes, Shannon, how can I manifest the life of my dreams? What would you say that is by using your coaching?
Well, I always think that there's two sides to manifesting. There's the mindset side, and then there's the emotional regulation side. So if we want to give practical tools, I'll give one thing on the mindset side that's got nothing to do with neuro-emotional coaching, but was an extremely valuable exercise that I did in my life when it came to organizing my actual story I was telling myself about not having enough time to do things and, kind of blaming my life circumstances on why things were not manifesting. So this is a great exercise to do. It's called a time audit, and I did it on this course years ago. We had to take 3 days, and for 3 days, you set a timer. Takes a lot of dedication, but you set a timer to go off every 15 minutes of your waking day, okay? And you have your notes app, and every 15 minutes the timer goes off. You just open the notes app and you write down in point form what you did for the last 15 minutes. So whether that's made a cup of tea, scrolled on Instagram, or had a conversation with my mom, or picked up the dog poop, whatever it was, you write it all down. And you do this for 3 days. And then after the 3 days, so before you do the exercise, what you can do is actually create that list of the times. So 9 to 9:15, dot, dot, next line, 9:15 to 9:30, dot, dot. So that all you got to do is open your app and actually just fill it out. So do the prep first. Then after the 3 days, you take that and then you create a spreadsheet of productive and non-productive. What is actually helping you move towards your goals and what is stopping you from moving towards your goals. And then you can add up the time. Now, when I did this, I was absolutely embarrassed to bring it back to the course because we had to share this. And I think everybody felt the same. It was so bad. Like 6 hours of my day was spent doing absolute nonsense that had nothing to do with me wanting to reach my goals. And yeah, I'm going, oh, I'm a single mom, it's so hard, life's terrible, you know. When I actually had so much time available to me, I was like, I can't stay up till 2 a.m. Well, I didn't actually have to. If I just stopped doing the things that I didn't even know that I was doing unconsciously, I actually had 6 hours extra in the day, you know. And at that time, I was very unconscious with my actions, you know, and the money I was spending on things I didn't need and just all those bits and pieces. So that's one mindset, like exercise, that I think is very important. It's like a time audit in terms of what are you actually spending your time doing that you didn't realize. And then you've got that. And then on the other side of the fence, and you can't do these two together. These are two separate exercises on different days. And then this is something that I do every day still, 3 times a day. And you can do it maybe for 1 week, 3 times a day, is an emotional check-in with yourself. So you set your timer to go off morning, noon, and night. And when that timer goes off, you just take a moment and you check in with yourself. I like to do a bit of a body scan. I go like from my toes up my body, kind of squeeze my calf muscles, squeeze my butt cheeks, tense my stomach muscles, roll my shoulders, roll my head a little bit. And, you know, just by doing that, if you are in a state of survival, your survival brain's going to be like, this person's paying quite detailed attention to their body. There's obviously not a lion coming to eat them right now. I can relax, you know, so it kind of just calms that basic primal system that's trying to keep you alive. So you might be in survival brain and not realize it. So that step really helps. And then you check in, what am I feeling? Can you name an emotion? And I feel any emotions that's happening for me right now. Maybe I'm feeling stressed and overwhelmed. And then kind of sit with those emotions for maybe 10 seconds and be like, okay, well, obviously I'm feeling overwhelmed. I've got about 100 things to get through today. I'm feeling stressed. That makes complete sense. So kind of just having 10 seconds to see myself and notice where I'm at. That's giving. So the first exercise is the body scan. That's meeting the survival brain needs. Second exercise, naming some emotion, seeing where that's showing up in my body and just feeling into it and going, that makes sense. Obviously, like giving yourself a moment to breathe into that and let that emotion be seen and heard. So that's really letting the emotional brain be seen and heard and have its needs met. And then you just take a deep breath in and out and carry on with your day. You don't even have to write that down. It's just about checking in. But doing that, and then after the week, kind of noticing, what are the emotions that showed up the most for me? Like, was I able to even name emotions? You know, if you don't even have the capacity to name an emotion, then that's actually a really good indication that you may be in a state of survival, because survival brain doesn't speak emotion. So kind of just those two exercises are complete opposite ends of the spectrum, but it gives you the awareness. And when it comes to manifesting, you need to be able to have an awareness as to where you're at if you want to know where you're going to be going. You know, a lot of people want to manifest things, but they have no idea where they're even at. And you need to know, where am I at in this big ocean of feelings and thoughts, so that I can actually move forward and say, this is where I want to be going. Because you can't get to where you want to be going if you don't even know where you're coming from.
Yeah, really beautifully said.
So yeah, I think that would be a very good place to start. Even without working with a neuro-emotional coach, you can just do these exercises for yourself, gauge where you're at, have an awareness around that. And then from there, you can decide what are my goals and my dreams, and how do I align myself more from a more grounded space to move towards that.
Shannon, that concludes our conversation. Thank you for your time, your wisdom. I am thoroughly looking forward to continuing my sessions with you. What I'll do is I'll drop a link to Shannon Mary's website. You can contact her directly, reach out to her for any coaching. It's worth it. You're worth it. It's a total investment. Shannon, thank you. Till next time. I hope we can have the chat soon again. I love you. And yeah.
Love you too. Thank you, friend.
If you liked what you heard, please do subscribe and send on the link to anyone that you feel might be able to resonate with this conversation. Remember to drop a comment and don't be afraid to share any ideas, topics that you would want me to speak about. Thank you for listening. Till next time.